So headed into Battleheart in Portland, with the November BNS announcement, we saw a rare change to the commoner format, the banning of Aether Ironweave. And I thought, and still do, that this was a pretty elegant move. Fair, low impact, and able to move the needle just a bit. And while no one can deny the value of Aether Ironweave's one battleworn, and of course its two resources, the backfill of Bloodtorn Bodice may have, from a certain standpoint, actually made Runeblades as a class better within the format.
A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando.
Since its release in Monarch, Aether Ironweave has been the equipment of choice for our Runeblades. And why wouldn't it be, right? Battleworn 1 on an equipment that pops for a benefit in Commoner is about all you can really ask for, aside from, of course, the heavy hitters spec helms. Getting two resources for, let's be honest, doing what you were going to do anyway was pretty insane value. But with the release of Rosetta, we saw our Runeblades get a whole slew of amazing new cards. And with the November 2024 BNS announcement, well, the Runeblade class got an ever so slight tone down with the banning of Aether Ironweave. Or did they? Because without really any hesitation, our Runeblade players across the board windmill slammed down Bloodtorn Bodice. And while sure, giving up one armor wasn't desirable in any way, there is a real solid argument that Bodice actually may have made Runeblades as a class better. Now yes, I want to grant, on paper, it's certainly worse. But what happened is that it actually slightly shifted strategies that may have actually helped them overall. And I think this was perfect, because it didn't really benefit Chane, it was pretty neutral there, but the other Runeblades from many aspects, well, they got better. So to understand exactly where I'm coming from here, let's first go look at some of the major players in Commoner that the Runeblades picked up out of Rosetta. We're talking Arcane Cussing, Deadwood Dirge, High Notes, and other cards like Rune Ravager Swarm and stuff like that as well. Now, Cussing and Deadwood Dirge were actually, you can see how they were designed to really kind of be played together. Sure, Cussing doesn't have to get Dirged, but if you can Cussing into Dirge, well, now that's pretty gross, isn't it? And part of the problem with Cussing, for example, so Dirge is basically just a windmill slam into basically every single Runeblade deck out there, right? I mean, again, Chane, he's got plenty of targets that he can just make on demand. But Cussing is a little harder, because if what you're trying to do is Cussing Dirge, again, the payoff is great, but now usually one of them sitting in Arsenal waiting, it's very rare that you're going to draw them both together, right? So you're using up some planning there, again, for good payoff, but it's not always super reliable, and someone like Briar, with the one cost for Cussing, it was just really too much risk to carry with other valuable slots. Also, if we looked at Aurora was never really using Cussing, she was doing other lightning things. And Florian, well, Florian's always off doing his own thing, isn't he? But now that you have Bodice, right? I mean, not now that we have Bodice, but before, when you were using Ironweave, it was too much of a liability to try and do the Cussing Dirge thing, right? You were really just playing Dirge and just kind of going with it. And that's not to say that you couldn't have played Bodice from the beginning. You could have, but again, you're going to skew towards Ironweave, which then makes you skew away from Cussing. And I'm not saying that Cussing alone is completely changing the power, but what it's doing is it's actually slightly changing the way these decks play. For example, when I started, now that Ironweave's gone and I went back and revisited my Briar deck, I actually added in Cussing because now I have Bodice and now I have multiple targets for which that to work on, right? So, and the deck itself actually probably might have actually gotten a little better. And here's the one thing, right, is Aether Ironweave obviously gives you the two resources, right, which is also really crazy good. But it's very rare, or at least for me, in the commoner format, most of the time what you're trying to do, because you have to play the non-attack and attack, most of the time you actually are only using one of those resources to swing Rosetta. Still well worth it, right, to leave that resource on the table and be able to come 2 and 2 when you need it. But to my point, because most of the time you were only using one resource, in many cases, Bodice is doing just what you need it to do anyway. Now, Cussing being one, and then using Bodice for Cussing, yes, I realize you're paying and then you're backfilling it, but a lot of times that's going to be sufficient for what you needed it to do, right? And again, in many of the other Runeblade cases, you're not always necessarily even using a blue to do it. You might be using maybe another red in some cases, right? Depending on what your hand looks like in like a Cheerios build. So getting that one resource back is pretty important, right? So pretty big deal there. The other thing is we had seen Runehold release kind of become the more preferred one over gauntlets, right? And when you really think about that as kind of like a whole overall package, the fact that you can, I guess, in a pinch, release into, I mean, not I guess, you can do it. It's obviously very undesirable, but you can release into Bodice if you need to. Obviously, if you're doing that, you're probably having other problems. Now, again, I'm not saying that because of Runehold release and Bodice that's what made it better. But what I am saying is that the slight play lines that have evolved out of now being able to do Bodice, going on cussing, which gives you one more non-attack, right? I mean, even someone like Viscerai doing all this together and making a whole buttload of rune chance when you're doing the thing, it's really, really, really good. Now, I acknowledge I may have gotten us slightly off topic talking about Runehold release into Bodice, and again, we're all clear that that's not super desirable, right? But the point I'm trying to make overall here is that while Aether Ironweave is a better piece of equipment, the play lines that have evolved because of, frankly, cussing and some of the other lines like out of Runehold release and stuff like that, some of these other lines have been able to evolve, and I think the lines themselves are better. Now, when we go and we look at Chane, probably it doesn't really matter for Chane in either direction, right? Yes, he gets one resource for popping one of his own auras, which helps long game, but probably him losing Ironweave probably was a net negative for him. But again, when I look at the other Runeblades, and yes, to be fair, I'm specifically talking Viscerai, Aurora, and I'm not talking Florian as much, right? It's mainly Briar, Viscerai, and Aurora. Being able to consistently now run that line and have it basically have a bailout for if you don't have to pair two things up together, which in aggro decks that are trying to run low profile or lower profile, you often don't have time for. So my overall conclusion here is I do think, ironically, that Runeblade as a class actually became elevated from the ban. And I want to be very, very, very clear here. It's not a complaint. I think it's a very cool observation, right? So let me know in the comments if you agree. Do you think that Ironweave being lost, do you think it cost Chane winning the Battle Hardened in Portland? I mean, they'd won the gold foil the day before. So let me know your thoughts. If you agree, if you disagree, if nothing else, folks, go Commando.